All right. Well, we're good and we're live. It's good to see you today. Hope that you had a good week. Hey, come on in. And we're just getting started and enjoyed the rain today and then the ice last week. So it's definitely been kind of a crazy couple weeks. But good to be here for our Truth Seekers. Again, every first and third Tuesday we have our Truth Seekers that we live stream and then we have conversation afterwards as well. So some of our, I always everything that we talk about here want it to be connected to our purpose and our principles, and it'll hit different ones of those at different times. One of the things that I think is very important, especially we're not just a political group that's talking about politics. We're recognizing this is a bigger spiritual issue that we're dealing with. And so, obviously, if you've listened to much of this, you would be able to tell that we lean conservative, right? Most of us may not identify as a Republican, but we are certainly more conservative. But our enemy are not people who disagree with us, right? The enemy is something much deeper than that, and so it's always important to recognize that. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that spiritual battle that's going on around us, whether we know it or not. And even if you're not religious, you can see the impact and the divide that's out there. Coming from a faith perspective, we use spiritual language to talk about that. But there's clearly a divide that's out there. So we're going to be talking about that. And also one of our principles talks about how the original founding principles found in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are consistent and supportive of the truth. So we're going to look at one of those phrases in the Declaration of Independence and how the spiritual battle, I think, is trying to subvert that. So we'll start with what was, everybody was talking about that happened on Sunday night, and that you probably didn't watch because no one watches them anymore, and that's the Grammys. I actually have never watched the Grammys. Even whenever I was a kid, I've never been a big music guy or, all that stuff. So I've never watched the Grammys. I still haven't watched the Grammys. But that is a cultural event, right? That is, and it does have a big impact. I mean, your children are listening to the songs that are being sung at the Grammys, whether they watch the Grammys or not. They are a major cultural influence. Not Vice President, First Lady Jill Biden spoke at the Grammys this year, right? So this is a big deal. And there was a guy that I've never heard of that probably actually very few people have ever heard of. His name is Sam Smith. He and another person, Kim Petras. Sam Smith at one point identified as being gay. Now he identifies, I think, as non-binary. Kim Petra is a trans woman. And they did their song that won Best Pop Song of the Year called Unholy, which is about a guy having an affair with his wife, and it's a real wholesome song as well. But the way that they were performing it was a little interesting, and you kind of laugh, right? It was very, people were definitely using the term satanic. It's obviously a satanic figure, right? And then you had other, scenes and things like that was clearly trying to create that imagery, okay? Now, what this does is this is an intentional provocation to get these, ridiculous backwoods Christians up in arms, right? Now, were they literally worshiping Satan? They were not viewing it that way at all, right? They were more mocking the whole religious thing. However, they actually were following satanic principles, whether they knew it or not, right? And what was real interesting is our culture now is starting to not be able to realize why something like that is a problem, right? And the guy, Sam Smith, he tweeted out beforehand, kind of with a picture, and he said, this is going to be special. CBS, the main CBS Twitter account, responded saying, you can say that again. We are ready to worship. Like, so it's kind of like, okay, what are we doing here? And they since deleted that tweet, right? And so again, in their minds, I'm giving a very charitable view. In their minds, they're just mocking it because they frankly, they don't believe in any of that spiritual stuff. They only like spiritual stuff whenever it's, oh, well, that'll make me feel better or whatever. Not that it's actually true. See, I'm crazy enough that I actually believe there is a spiritual world out there that is both good, that comes from God, and that is evil. And so I would prefer for no one to mess around like that. But that's being done kind of in jest, but it's actually reflective of something really ugly in our culture that is happening, that is causing major divisions. One of the things that I've was talking about, started over a year ago, and started really looking at, okay, we are dealing with a spiritual battle here. And part of that is you can look at the different strongholds that are held. And I talked about abortion being one of those. And the change in abortion, where it moved from being safe, legal, and rare to being celebrated, right? To really being turned into ritual. And there would be some pushback. No, that's not what this is, just about women's rights and things like that. No, there's something underlying this. And again, I don't know if the people who kind of do some of this stuff recognize what they're dealing with, but they are upholding some very evil and satanic worldviews. This is a statue. This was before it was put up. That is in New York. And it is now on top of a courthouse in New York somewhere. It is called Now, N-O-W. Let's see, it was the person it was a Pakistani American lady who was the sculptor. And she said her work was called Now because it represented the urgency to protect women's reproductive rights after the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. And she said this, she said, with Ginsburg's death, talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was on the Supreme Court, and the reversal of Roe, there was a setback to women's constitutional progress. She said the horns were designed as a symbol to the figure's sovereignty and its autonomy. Now, here's another picture. So you can see kind of the hair, that's the horns, the little collar around, that was Ruth Bader Ginsburg always wore one of those. And then you kind of have the tentacles. She's standing in a lotus flower. And then this is where it actually is. So it doesn't even match the other things. So there's lots of problems here just from an art perspective. And a lot of people have a problem with that. But what's behind it is actually very disturbing. Like if you do a little bit of research into some pagan gods and idols that were built, thousands of years ago, they kind of looked something like that. There were some that did. And again, does this person that did this, were they thinking, hey, I'm following a evil spiritual ideology? Probably not, right? But they are, right? And it's very clear that is one of the things that's happening. And we need to recognize that there are a lot of good people who get caught up in this and don't recognize there is a spiritual element to what's going on. And so then to kind of continue down that path, you have, this is called TST Health. It is a clinic that is being built in New Mexico. This is real. I took this screenshot today. It is, if you can't read that, it says TST Health provides free religious telehealth medication, abortion care, courtesy of the Satanic Temple. Okay, right? Like my trying to be sympathetic here and say people don't recognize what they're doing is getting really stressed by things like this. And one of the things that I said that really disturbed me about the change in how abortion was being looked at and viewed is that people are starting to see it as kind of a ritual, right? And unfortunately, back in pagan cultures, when I believe there were spiritual forces at play back then, just as they are now, one of the things that was common was human sacrifice, specifically child sacrifice. And it wasn't just limited to one culture. You can go far enough back, you're going to find it in all cultures, right? And it was because they were following a certain spiritual identity that was not the spiritual identity that's shown in the Bible, right? I mean, to simplify it. But that's why this is a little problematic to me. What is an abortion ritual? The abortion ritual serves as a protective rite. Its purpose is to cast off unwanted feelings that a patient may be experiencing due to choosing to have a legal and medically safe abortion. Just that right there is so contradictory. If you're having bad feelings about doing it, it means there's something that is inherently wrong with this, right? But the ritual is designed to make it easier. It's designed to alleviate stressors and empower the patient to be guided by the Satanic Temple's third and fifth tenets when pursuing their decision. The ritual serves to assist in affirming their decision and to ward off the effects of unjust persecution, which can cause one to stray from the paths of scientific reasoning and free will that TST members strive to embody. The ritual consists solely of spoken words. It's exclusively verbal. It's meant to provide vocal affirmation and comfort for those obtaining an abortion. The oral ritual includes the recitation of the Satanic Temple's third and fifth tenets. So I want to quickly say here, this is not, some people go so far and say, oh, they're doing this in a back room and it's all hooded, kind of like you see in the movies. Maybe there's people that are doing this. That's not what this is. I believe it's just as evil and demonic, but it's tapping into something that is really scary, and it is driving a lot of our division. You can actually, on this website, I have a wonderful browser history now. On this website, you can, on FAQs, and you can find out, well, what is the Satanic Temple? And you can click on that, and it takes you. And it clarifies, it's not Satan worship, it's the Satanic Temple. And so let's read their tenets. And it's going to blow your mind a little bit, because on some of them you're going to go, hey. In fact, most of them you're going to, oh, okay. That's not too bad, which is why this is so subversive. And many people have gotten sucked up in it, not realizing what's going on. And so, number one should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason. Okay, so we can accept some of that, but right there, they're basically putting their God as reason, right? And we've seen this happen before. France had a revolutionary war that was based on reason, and it did not go well. Number two, the struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail, listen to this, prevail over laws and institutions, right? So the pursuit for justice is above laws and institutions. What would fall under institutions? The church, of course, would, right? Of course, the government would. Of course, anything human-made would fall under that. 3, one's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone, which that is a key tenet to what, in my mind, Satanism is. Satanism is not about ritualistically worshiping Satan. It is about making yourself God. So don't get bogged down in all the creepy, fantastical stuff. It's really pretty simple. Satanism, that ideology that goes against God, basically is you making yourself God. That is what this is about. Now, this is done to try to better the world, as warped as that is. That is their goal. 4, the freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forgo one's own. 5, belief should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's belief. That's very, very interesting. But again, what is becoming the driving force? Science. What is behind science? It's human ingenuity, right? Of researching and learning about the world, which can be wonderful, but they are elevating that is what drives us, basically. People are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and resolve any harm that may have been caused. Okay. And 7, every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. And there it is, right? We could agree with nearly all of those phrases in one way or the other. But it is driving to something much more dark. And while I don't think the best marketing tool is to label yourself the Satanic Temple, these principles are out there loud and clear in our culture and our society today. That we ourselves are God, right? And so yes, you need to show empathy to each other, because whatever that person decides to how they live their life, that's fine, because they are their own God. You are your own God, right? This is infiltrating us, our society, and it's infiltrated the churches, because it kind of comes off as, well, that's just being nice to people. Well, you just let them live the way that they want to live. Okay, you've got to be very careful with that. Well, I want to. This was a dangerous transition, and I'm asking you to be very mature. But it's a good. I'm not saying the next thing that we're going to talk about, or the next person that we're going to talk about, is part of the Satanic Temple. I'm saying that this is an example of how this ideology is starting to creep in, and it flies directly in the face of our country's founding principles, as well as obviously biblical founding principles. I mean, no doubt. But one thing that within our country that those tenets go directly against is in the Declaration of Independence, where it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Right? That does not fit with a worldview like we just saw. And again, don't think of that worldview that we just talked about as, oh, these are those crazy people that are getting robes and going and doing things. No, this is the anti-God worldview that unfortunately is growing in our culture. And this is a clip of our vice president talking. It was on supposed to be the 50th anniversary of Roe versus Wade, but they were very sad because Roe versus Wade was overturned, which, by the way, did not make abortion illegal. It just put it back into the hands of the states. But was talking about that, and of course is talking about it from a position of how horrible that was. And she says some things that we would agree with, but and some of this I think could be a slip of the tongue. I understand how speaking is. It can be difficult. But there's a couple of things that you may notice in this minute clip.
because we collectively believe and know America is a promise. America is a promise. It is a promise of freedom and liberty, not for some, but for all. A promise we made in the Declaration of Independence, that we are each endowed with the right to liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Be clear, these rights were not bestowed upon us. They belong to us as Americans.
All right. So there's a couple of things in there if you were listening. The first part, most of us would definitely agree with. There's no issue there. The reason this clip kind of went viral is because she's talking at a abortion supporting thing, and of the three inalienable rights that are listed, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that is just kind of normal to remember those three. They just go. She left off life at an abortion rally. I don't know. I don't know what that means, but it's interesting that you would specifically reference the Declaration of Independence and then mess up the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Now, I understand messing up even a familiar phrase. That's why I wrote it down, because I was like, but another part that was messed up at the beginning, she talked about that we are, she said, endowed with unalienable, she said inalienable, it's unalienable rights, okay? Oh, okay, but if you notice, there's something that should jump out to you there. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Now, if she would have just stopped there, that would have been fine. And I actually just caught this today as I was looking at this. After she messed up life, she specifically said, no one gives you those rights. They are ours because we're Americans. No, someone does give you those rights. It is God and God alone. And that, I know, I don't believe she was thinking in those terms, but at all. But do you see how that creeps into just our way of looking at the world? Right? Our founders understood that it was vital that we recognize there is a Creator, and that is who we look to for truth, for justice. All of that stuff has to come and flow from someone greater than ourselves, because if it doesn't, then we just create it on our own. And what has happened is that the government itself is starting to take that place of Creator. That is exactly what is happening. And so there's a lot of people who don't realize this because it is subtle. And again, I do not believe that Kamala Harris is joining the Satanic Temple in any way. Those are principles that go against the Word of God that have infiltrated our society so much that most of us don't even know that we're spouting them off, right? And we all need to be aware of that. And it's vital for us to understand this, because I didn't want to go, we're not going to go much further than that tonight. But the scary thing is, as we move forward, and what we need to be awake to as Christians and as the church, with technology changing and the ability that we're going to have as humans. For example, there is a company right now that by 2027, they have planned, they are going to have a woolly mammoth walking the world. This is very legitimate. I mean, there's been billions of dollars given because they believe they can do this. That gene editing technology is there. The technology is farther than we probably even realize. Technology can be good, but I want someone who believes that there is a Creator above them to tinker with that technology rather than someone who thinks they're their own God. That leads to disaster. And we better be awake to that as technology comes around, and especially as we start to think that we can fix any problem. Oh, well, we can just bring those species back. I think there was a documentary about that called Jurassic Park. It didn't go real well, right? But that's a silly thing, right? The woolly mammoth, okay, whatever. But that's just the tip of the iceberg of what that technology will be able to do. It will be able to do all kinds of things to you. It can supposedly could, cure anything that you may ail you. Well, we better be careful with that. And you certainly want people making those decisions to recognize that there is a creator and that they are not God. And in fact, that there's a God who will hold us accountable. We need leaders that are going to do that and openly will not forget that our rights come from God and not from ourselves and not from a government for sure. All right. Thank you for joining us. Hope you sleep well tonight. We'll see you next time, third Tuesday of this month. We'll see you then.